I'm Vic Pepper. He's my great-grandfather, and he's the founder of Comrades Marathon.
Look, Tugo, halfway there. How are you feeling?
Feeling good, but I fell and I hurt myself.
Are you okay?
I'm fine, but it's just sore now.
Hey, Susie, what's happening?
Look, Tugo fell, but she's going strong. Anthony's coming through now.
All right, thank you so much.
This is this convergence that we're
Go check out our
watching here.
website. We've got some great videos where you can follow, track all the runners on ecr.co.za.
So much spirit, so much festivities. I love this one. I don't want to leave, but we have to go now. We have to go and find Anthony at that next place and find Nunta Toko. She won't be far away. She won't be far away from finishing.
So it was very strategically tweaking stuff throughout the day, using Twitter, driving people back to the website. We had wonderful drama at around lunchtime when several cars caught on fire. We happened to be there, our crews were on scene. TV didn't cover it at all. We broke into programming with that. We tweeted it. The sponsor was linked to it by nature of just being tagged and everything. That
We are at the main parking lot just outside Camperdown and near the Green Mile.
For us, we see this as a real 360 campaign, using our FM product to amplify what we're doing in the visual, the social media, and the online space. With an audience of 1.4 million listeners, it's very easy to do. And with the kind of capabilities we now have in both the digital and the social media spaces, coupled with our team at East Coast TV, we're able to listen, watch, share.
Nunta Tsugo has made it. After her first Comrades Marathon ever,
I feel like I've conquered the world.
Joe?
All right, Joe. Back to where we were. So, sport media convergence. I think we maybe ended with this slide on Tuesday. Convergence occurs when the media platforms intersect and they partner. In other words, one doesn't take over the other, overwhelm the other. They intersect to make for a much better total presentation. That's convergence. If we know that the primary roles and functions of mass media are to inform, obviously, to create, to influence. We talked about influence in here, how we talked about leadership last time, and how one of the functions of a leader is to influence the subordinates in such a way that they behave like the leader would like them to. And usually there's some carrot that's dangling out there that gets these subordinates to act that particular way. Now there's what we call a symbiotic relationship between sport media and sport entity. The media filling up the programming schedules. Notice in the balloon there, the many forms of media provide services for sports entities. And then the red balloon, as a result of these media services, sport organizations are publicized, they're marketed, and they receive revenue. Tuesday, I made the comment that there is a correlation, or actually I asked you the question whether you believe that there was a correlation between sport media communication, sport communication, multimedia, and college athletic revenue. discussed that just for a few minutes, I think everybody was in agreement that there's not only a correlation, but probably a positive correlation that could be measured. Now, let me just throw in a caveat there, so we know kind of what we're talking about, and to the degree of which we're making this point. A correlation, all a correlation says is that there's some relationship. I think I used the example a week ago. We consider there to be a correlation between studying and good grades. The more you study, usually the better grades you get. The less you study, the lower grades you get. Most people would accept that as a true correlation. Whether or not we could make that statistically positive or statistically significant, well, that's another thing. Okay, so let's go then to sport media, multimedia, having a correlation with college sport revenue. We mentioned the fact that Ohio State and all the Big Ten teams in football will be playing before empty stadiums. So here's big Ohio Stadium, holds 105,000, and there's going to be just a fraction of people there. The coaches, cheerleaders, I guess, sports, the media upstairs, the training people. So, now we're going to see it on TV, but where's all this, that's where they make their money, is selling the tickets. So, if we were to conduct a study and look to see what all the factors were going into college revenue, college athletic revenue, we would probably find that attendance in the stadium was a big factor. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it would be statistically significant. You can do studies and find out that they are not statistically significant. My own doctoral program turned out to be statistically insignificant, my results. And you might say, well, that was a flop, wasn't it? Well, not necessarily. It told us something. It told us what we were trying to prove was not statistically significant, so we know something about it. I won't go into the subject. It's unless you want to really try to go to sleep in class. Now, here's another even shorter video. And have you noticed how these days there are more and more, first of all, videos on YouTube of high school games? I was looking through just what was there, and it's amazing. There's games that are taped and put on YouTube from all over the country. In addition to that, there's so many channels on cable that you can probably pick up a local game on cable tomorrow night. It used to be that the only high school football games you ever saw on TV might be the state championship game. And that wasn't always for sure. But now we see any number, and here's a very short video of a company that is getting ready, preparing to record a high school football game. Well, go back here. All right. Let's try this. Well, I had this all ready to go. I guess when I clicked out of the last one. Technical difficulties.
What's your favorite browser extension?
Online shopping is easy, but not always affordable.
It's pretty natural to be a bit nervous because you know all the things that can go wrong. And certainly some things will go wrong. That's part of the excitement though. Knowing that there's going to be challenges to face and see how well we can do it. You know, most people show up at a sporting event, maybe even watching it on television, with no thought of the countless hours, days, months that have gone into that event.
And that's Montgomery. He breaks the tackle. He's going to have enough for a first down. Jessen just wings it out there. He's got a receiver. Touchdown.
For us, a live Friday night game doesn't start Friday night.
Did you notice the sponsor ads?
Monday morning, what does that look like? Well, we've got just a few days till live game day, so we're looking at a complete crew and staff behind the scenes coordinating the logistics for the broadcast, for the setup, for the distribution, equipment testing and preparation that has to be taken care of, video assets, audio assets that need to be edited and prepared and ready for live production. Well, as if all of the live broadcast systems isn't enough, sometimes we layer on the Jumbotron. But again, the thrill that comes when you light it up and people see their own face and are able to interact with it adds a whole new level to our production. Lots going on behind the scenes before people show up in the stadium and see the Jumbotron or tune into the live feed. One of the exciting aspects is being able to bring together a vast background of people, talent, they're commentators or announcers, they understand the game, all the way down to other technical people, whether the camera operators, live graphics, instant replay, switching. There's also network engineers and people in the background making sure that we have the connectivity we need to deliver our streams. Live TV, live production, there's a lot of unknown, and again, that's really part of the thrill of producing it. When you're right there, when you're in the chair, sometimes you feel like a conductor up there, just directing the music, or directing the show, and having all those individual instruments and pieces coming together. For most people, the game's over and that's it. Turn on the lights, go home, turn off the TV. For me and my team, a lot of our work has just begun. Now it's time to get it all packed up and in most cases then of course hit the road and travel. It's a big commitment on the part of our crew. They're very dedicated people who are willing to stay late and make things happen, usually working late into the night. The truth is, we couldn't do it without our sponsors. Typically, you won't find this level of production and commitment in a lot of communities of our size. And it's because of the good people that come together and help us and support us that allow us to be able to execute this in the way that we do.
here's another way that we find in the last few years, this that I'm about to explain to you, the media has converged like none other. Has anybody here ever run in a cross-country race? Okay, Josh, you ran cross. Anybody ever see a cross-country race? High school, college? Okay. It used to be that when you come to the finish, you know, if everybody just came one at a time, that'd be fine, but a lot of times everybody comes at once. How do you figure it out? You know, you got people, we got timers here at the finish. Well, they've done everything from every runner that comes, they hand them a popsicle stick with a number on it, or they tear off a little label on the number they're wearing, and they put it on a spool. Those are some of the mundane ways. What do you do when they're all coming at you? Well, you have people that are manning the ropes. These are what we call chutes. Okay, so these guys, they have ropes here. Okay, when this chute fills up, they open this rope. They do this, and then they open this rope, and then they come in, so then they know how to take them in order. Well, that's the old way. It still works. If you're on a low budget, it works. Nowadays, anybody know how they record finishers in a cross-country race or a road race?
Old trackers, right?
The what?
They have like, when they have the number, they've got like a magnet or a little tracker.
Yeah, they either have a tracker on the number, or more often they'll have these little tabs that you put one on each shoe, and then there's a carpet that you run. There's usually 2 or 3 carpets that you cross at the finish line that picks up who crosses, and you can have 10 people abreast coming across, and it's going to pick it up and put who, you know, the actual order, and they go immediately up onto a screen because everyone wants to see what their time and their place was. Convergence of multimedia. I mean, there is no end, seemingly, to the technology that enables us to get our information right now. You have no idea how mixed up people can get. Like somebody happens to sneak over here. I'll tell you about NEI Cross Country Nationals. Used to be held at Wisconsin Parkside. What a place to have nationals in November in Wisconsin. But anyhow, that's where they have them. And they had 10 sheets set up. And when you came across, they tore the thing off of your number and put it on a spool. And that's the way they knew who was finishing in order. They never filled up all 10 chutes because they just ran them through. And the meet director the night before always would tell them, make sure that your runner has a number on. If he doesn't have a number, we're going to take his shirt off and put it on the spool. If he's not wearing a shirt, we're going to take the runner and put him on the spool. And I always got a laugh from everybody. But now, when you go to a road race or to a cross-country meet, usually at the finish you're going to see a trailer that looked about the size of the one we just saw, with all the technical equipment that allows teams to put these little tags on their shoes. And Lord help you if you lose those, because they're going to charge you $20 a tag, because they're reusable. And the people that own these systems travel all over and do 3-4 races a week and can make a pretty good living doing that. Now there's a job in multimedia sport administration you may not even have known about. It takes a little bit of outlay in the beginning, but it's a pretty good living along the way. Well, we talked a little about sport publishing up front here. And where's my notes? Here was one of the questions on the quiz. 3 most circulated papers in the U.S. Well, I don't know how many of you read the Wall Street Journal. Interestingly enough, they have sports now in the Wall Street Journal. Go figure. The New York Times and USA Today. USA Today has gone, if we were to chart the interest of these papers along a timeline, we'd see USA Today go along and then up. It's just, I don't know, the way they publish it in terms of the sections, the ease with which we can buy it. You know, if you want to buy the New York Times, you obviously can have one delivered to your home every day, very expensive, or people that like the Times will buy a Sunday edition, and a lot of times you can buy that at a drugstore, but they run out quickly. USA Today, they're sold just about everywhere. And if you don't mind on the weekend, getting one that kind of lasts for 3 days. I put this particular copy of, or the front of New York Times. Anybody know who that is? Picture of the New York Times. Yeah, Alex Rodriguez. Exactly. A quick look at him and look away, it almost looks like Mickey Mantle, but the closer you look, obviously it's not. Print sport communication, a medium for disseminating printed material. And our comment here, all print sport communication is regarded as sport publishing, but not necessarily the other way around. We have the wire services. In other words, AP, by the way, is the one, the Associated Press. There's the United Press International. There's Reuters. Reuters may be the one you hear about a lot with news, but in terms of sports, most of those are AP stories. That simply means that if you look on the front page of a local paper, or the front, page 1 of the sports page, you read an article that is national in relevance, and well, what happened? How did this Canton Repository reporter Victor White? No, look, and at the beginning it'll show AP or UPI. It means that they took it off the wire. The newspaper paid to have this particular wire service story in the paper. And it's a way of making your paper diverse without actually paying a lot of sports writers. With so many people accessing the news on the web, many medium and small-sized papers have reduced not only their page numbers, but also the actual page size. Have any of you noticed that about newspapers? Did they, I don't know, does anybody live in the Columbus area and you get the Dispatch? Okay, the Columbus Dispatch, been around for over 100 years. About 10 years ago, maybe not that long, they went from a regular sized newspaper to about half the size of paper. You opened it up, and it was kind of like a community newspaper in the way the size. And that really turned me off. They didn't ask me first, but that's not what turned me off. I just didn't like the size. But the more I, got into it, it was easier to handle. Why did they go to a smaller size? It's a simple answer. Anybody know? Why did they reduce the size of the paper, of the print paper? Money. Costs less. Still has the same number of ads. In fact, if you look at the paper, by the way, they decided at a point about a year ago that wasn't making it. They increased the size of the dispatch, not quite to the original, but much larger, and looks like a normal newspaper now. Interestingly enough, there's seems like a lot more full-page ads than there used to be. Could be the paper is smaller, but they have more ads. Maybe that's just the way it goes. Sport magazines, Sports Illustrated, probably, I think we can all assume that it'd be the premier sport magazine. It has been for years, came out in 1954, and would come out once a week. And that's, when you consider once a week for 50-some years, and it's not a cheap magazine. Well, most recently, it comes out like twice a month. And from my perspective, you would think that if it comes out twice a month, each issue is going to be packed with stuff, great stuff, in my opinion at least. I don't think it is. I still get it right now, but I don't just look forward to it coming. It used to be on Thursday, it arrived Thursdays, people were waiting for it. Well, now they have they're online as well. They can reach many more people online, obviously. We talked about ESPN, the magazine, and they've gone totally online. There's no longer a print edition of this. Experiencing sport through radio. I mentioned this one other time. I don't remember why we were talking about radio, but here's Muhammad Ali. Actually, at the time, he was Cassius Clay, because this was in 1964, and the fight was not on TV, this particular fight. Sonny Liston was the heavyweight champion of the world, heavily favored against Cassius Clay, the arrogant, brash Cassius Clay, the very confident Cassius Clay. Well, it didn't take long for him to knock Sonny Liston out. I actually listened to that with my dad back in '64 on the radio. A lot of people thought Sonny Liston took a dive because he had some connections to the mafia, and or at least some type of organized crime. We'll never know. He's not living anymore. In terms of when this all started, the first boxing match that was broadcast on the radio was back in '21, and then from there it just has bloomed and bloomed, obviously. Now here's this demassification occurring with radio. We have all sport radio, all sport talk radio. This is what 97.1 The Fan. If you ever go to an Ohio State game, you'll find they have a big trailer that's outside the stadium. They broadcast the game. Probably the best station to listen to the game. Throughout the week, throughout the day, they have various programs that are kind of interesting. They last 2 or 3 hours usually for each particular segment. And here's more of how radio has experienced this demassification. You can't get enough fantasy sports. Tune in to Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. I think I asked this one other time, but how many of you are in a fantasy sports, or throughout the year, some fantasy sports league? Anybody? Okay. Has anybody ever done it with Sirius Radio? Okay. Obviously, TV is the medium that has revolutionized sport in terms of media the most. The picture I have up here, the cover of Sports Illustrated back in 1968, the Astrodome, which is, I think, closed now, the Houston Astrodome was the first big domed building. And in '68, UCLA, along with Lou Alcindor, who later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they had won two straight, maybe national championships. I think they went into this game undefeated, and they played Houston with Elvin Hayes. Well, the game was going to be so big a deal that so many people wanted to watch it, they put it on in the Houston Astrodome. And up until that point, that was the largest crowd ever to see a basketball game anywhere. Like 50-some thousand people. I remember watching the second half of that. My high school had a basketball game. I went to high school in Columbus, and we had a game in Marietta, and we came back and we got to watch the second half. Interestingly enough, Elvin Hayes and Houston defeated Lou Alcindor and UCLA, but UCLA went on to still win the national championship that year. The very first TV broadcast of a baseball game was actually a college game between Columbia and Princeton. Anybody, does that check off something in your mind there? Does it remind you of anything in terms of Princeton with being in the first televised baseball game? You remember anything about another sport? Who was in the very first NCAA football game? Princeton. Against, anybody know? This is history that you really need to know in sport management. Rutgers and Princeton. Well, in this particular case, it wasn't the first baseball game, but it was the first one that was ever broadcast, and they only had one camera. It was on the third baseline. Can you imagine that? That guy had to be really busy, zooming that camera around, and look how they set it up. Fortunately, it looks like it didn't rain. Here's kind of a timeline, if you will, of history through TV. NBC broadcast the first college football game, NBC did. And then we have TV programming that's moved to the weekends. In the 60s, increased audiences because of the advertisers that are involved. And then in '63 was the introduction of the instant replay. Now, I don't remember